When people think of U.S. presidents, they often imagine power, respect, and prestige. But not every man in the White House was admired. Some were so deeply hated that they faced massive protests while still in office, and their names became symbols of distrust and anger. So, who were the most hated U.S. presidents during their time in power? Richard Nixon is remembered as the first and only U.S. president to resign. But the truth is, his unpopularity had already exploded long before Watergate, especially because of the Vietnam War. When he campaigned, Nixon promised peace with honor. Instead, he prolonged the war. His policy of Vietnamization meant pulling out American troops while pushing South Vietnamese soldiers into the fight. At the same time, Nixon secretly expanded the war by bombing Cambodia and Laos to disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail, an essential supply route carrying weapons and food to the Viet Cong. When the bombings became public, Americans felt betrayed. Anti-war protests erupted nationwide. The tragedy reached a peak in 1970 at Kent State University, where the National Guard shot and killed 4 student demonstrators. Vietnamese people hated Nixon even more. To them, he was the face of bombs and destruction. In fact, many in Vietnam nicknamed their dogs Nix as an insult and a way to vent their anger. And then came Watergate. Nixon's operatives were caught breaking into the Democratic headquarters to wiretap phones. The scandal exploded, and once the secret White House tapes were revealed, Nixon had no escape. Facing impeachment, he resigned in 1974. From a landslide election winner, Nixon fell to become a symbol of lies and betrayal. George W. Bush began his presidency with a surge of support after 9/11. Americans stood behind him as the U.S. went to war in Afghanistan. But his decision to invade Iraq in 2003 turned him into one of the most unpopular presidents in modern history. The Bush administration claimed Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and ties to terrorism, but no such weapons were ever found. Americans realized they had been dragged into a costly war built on false information. The war lasted for years, killing thousands of U.S. troops and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians. Scandals like the torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib prison shocked the world. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy collapsed in the 2008 financial crisis, destroying Bush's credibility even further. By the end of his presidency, Bush's approval rating had plunged to about 25%, one of the lowest in U.S. history. Many historians and citizens rank him among the worst presidents ever. Andrew Johnson became president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in 1865. Instead of uniting the country after the Civil War, he quickly became one of the most hated leaders in American history. Johnson opposed giving rights to freed slaves. He vetoed key laws designed to protect African Americans, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Congress had to override his vetoes to pass them. His leniency toward former Confederates enraged Northern politicians and citizens who saw him as betraying Lincoln's legacy. His clashes with Congress were so extreme that in 1868, Johnson became the first U.S. president to be impeached. Although he narrowly escaped removal from office, his presidency was seen as a disaster. Herbert Hoover entered office with a reputation as a successful businessman and humanitarian. But within months, the stock market crashed in 1929, and the Great Depression began. Millions of Americans lost their jobs, homes, and savings. Hoover believed in limited government and refused to provide direct federal aid to struggling families. Instead, he encouraged charities and local communities to handle the crisis. This approach failed, and people grew furious. Shantytowns of homeless Americans were mockingly called Hoovervilles. In 1932, thousands of World War I veterans, known as the Bonus Army, marched on Washington demanding early payment of promised bonuses. Hoover ordered the military to force them out. Images of soldiers attacking veterans shocked the nation and destroyed his reputation completely. History shows us that even the most powerful leaders can fall from grace. From Nixon's lies and cover-ups, to Bush's disastrous war, to Johnson's betrayal of Lincoln's vision, and Hoover's failure during the Depression, each of these presidents became symbols of anger and disappointment in their own time.